In today's show, it's a mailbag episode answering listener-submitted questions about a Trailblazers dream season, who's the go-to scorer down the stretch, and what's wrong with a little bit of Jerami Grant. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen. Coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make it a part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's episode, it is a mailbag edition of the program, answering listener-submitted questions all episode long. We will get into questions about the Blazers, what is the most likely version of a Blazers dream season. We'll talk go-to scorer down the stretch and answer the question, what's wrong with a little Jerami Grant? That's what we'll do. If you want to get involved in a future mailbag episode, the way to do it is to email me, lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com is the email address, lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com. I'm pretty darn good at answering emails. I'm probably not 100% return rate, but I'm up there. I'm pretty good at it. That's the best way to get in contact with me for sure. You can find me there just like Scott has. Scott asks the following questions. The listener, Scott. A fairy tale season would be 50 wins and a top 6 seed. What would that look like? Which path is more likely? You could tell Scott is a longtime listener to the program because this is exactly how my brain works. This is exactly how my brain works. To me, I think some people do it differently, right? And I do my show the way I do my show, for better or for worse. But the way my brain works is like, if the Blazers were to have a great deal of success, how would they get there, right? Like I like to say, if this is the end point, how did they chart that path? Like that's the way the logic of my thinking about basketball and about the sport works. Yeah, Scott, you've listened to a handful of these, right? You've listened to. I'm gonna guess, Scott, hundreds, many hundreds, because this is exactly how my my basketball brain works. And so this is the what's more likely. If you're familiar with the program, you know we like to play that game here. I stole that one from Locked On Raptors and Sean Woodley. Sean, congrats on the newest addition to your family, and also thanks for giving me this game that I stole. What's more likely? Dream Season Edition. Here we go. Scoot Henderson, Shaedon Sharpe, Tumani Kamara, Denny Avdia, and Donovan Clingan all take significant steps forward, and Drew Holiday and Jerami Grant are more 2023-24 than 24-25. Or one of the young guys takes an all-star leap, or something unforeseeable. We'll get to the unforeseeable part in a moment. I do think... So this is like what's the Blazers' dream season, a 50-win season, top 6 seed, like they're squarely in the playoffs. I think if they win 50 games, they'll probably flirt with home court advantage, right? That's probably top 4 in the West, I would assume. Like that would be right. I think if you have home court advantage in the playoffs, you're a team that has had a really good year and has a chance to do something special because you're going to be playing home games to kick off a playoff series. And perhaps a home game to kick off 2 playoff series should you win the first one. Dream season. So what's more likely? One of the sort of core young 5, Scoot, Shade 2, Denny, Clingan, they all take significant step forward, and the sort of the veterans, the older heads, Drew Holiday and Jerami Grant get back to their better seasons of 2 seasons ago as opposed to last year when they both had down years. Or one of those youngsters takes an all-star leap, like a singular all-star leap or something unforeseeable. I think it's something unforeseeable, right? I think it's always going to be that's the most likely, because if you could predict it, if you could predict it, it would be simple. So it's like, Chris Murray shoots 45% from 3, and all of a sudden they've got this elite depth coming off the bench. I don't think that propels you to 50 wins in and of itself. I think the probably win 50 games is probably what's more likely is the all-star leap. because I think it's the singular talent that they're missing. Like, I think the Blazers are going to be competitive enough to be like, to win 35 to 40 games ish, right? Like, give or take. But I think I'm not going to make actual season predictions till we get to like August or whatever, September. But right now I feel like they're somewhere in the 35 to 40-ish win range. I think that's pretty reasonable. And, there's outcomes on either side of that. But if they were going to take off and win 10 more games, it's because of like Denny Avdia is an all-star. Shaedon Sharpe is an all-star level player. And that is what takes them there. I think the first one is fairly likely to be like the Scoot, Shea, 2, Denny all take significant steps, and Drew and Jerami Grant get back to like Drew and JG get back to productive levels, and they're similar to the 23-24 season. I think that is a team that wins 45 plus games, right? That's a team that like is very squarely in the mix and finishes 7th or 8th. I think the like true baseline of where they are now, plus an all-star leap, like not a, hey, everybody's a little bit better, significant step forward, but like all-star. It's so hard to make the all-star team in the West. If you make the all-star team in the Western Conference, you're almost certainly one of the 20 best players in the league, just because of how much more talent is in the West than the East, particularly this year when some of the top-end talent in the East, Halliburton, Lillard, Tatum, are all going to miss significant time, if not the entire season, right? Like, if you make the all-star team in the Western Conference, you're one of the 20 best players in the league. And if Denny Avdia or Tumani Kamara, Shaedon Sharpe, Scoot Anderson, I think it's really Shea and Denny and 2 are your realistic candidates, although Scoot could surprise. And I guess Klingon could too, but it seems pretty unlikely. Like, if one of those dudes makes the all-star team and you're one of the 20 best players in the league, then I could see that being the most likely thing that propels the Blazers forward. Scott asks like something unforeseeable and offers some examples, and I like these, so I'll share them with you. Rob Williams has a Defensive Player of the Year type season, a trade that brings in real depth, and that would be like real top-end depth, as opposed to like, hey, you've got some interesting pieces here and you can play 10 guys and kind of like be okay, but like real, frontline depth. I think that's like real, like, okay, you have 8 players who could play in a playoff series and you wouldn't be worried about them even one little bit type of depth. I think that's what Scott means here. Or a back half of the roster guy becomes a starter. That's what I'm talking about with Chris Murray. It's like Chris Murray shoots 45% from 3. Oh, whoa. Like, I don't know, Ryan Rupert, just like it pops for him, right? He figures it out, and it like light bulb goes on, and all of a sudden he's like, he's like, oh, Ryan Rupert's better than Shaedon Sharpe. That's obviously that's a wild thing to say, but like that level of like, oh, Ryan Rupert like deserves to play. Ryan Rupert deserves to play, 28 minutes every night because he's so freaking good. Okay, that might be something that propels him there. I think so. I'll rank these in what's more likely. What is more likely path? I think the first one is the most likely path for like reasonable could happen to the Blazers. I think the second one is most likely in terms of what would it take for the Blazers to win 50 games, all-star level leap. And I think the last one, something unforeseeable, is probably the most likely in terms of like, if you just had to pick one of these, what would a fairy tale season be? It would be something that you can't name on July 10th that happens on January 3rd of next year. That's what's more likely. Scott, this is a really good one. Thank you. If the Blazers win 50 games, boy, is it going to be a fun year of podcasting. Oh man, okay. This is not a woe is me. I'm here by choice. I started to do the podcast in 2019. I didn't take it super seriously, but at the end of that year, the Blazers had their Western Conference Finals run, and Damian Lillard hits a freaking 37-foot the bad shot game series winner. There's a 4 overtime game. They make the Western Conference Finals. The best they've been in 20 years, right? The best run they've had in 20 years. Since then, I kind of started taking it more seriously the following season, and like since then they've been mostly bad. They've been mostly bad. I would love to podcast about like a legitimately good, successful, fun Blazers team, because I've really cut my teeth. And I've improved at it by virtue of them being bad, right? So they've kind of given me some place to improve my craft. But I feel like my craft is at a place where I would love to just talk into this microphone about a good basketball team. So let's hope they win 50 games. Let's just get there and see if I can talk about wins more often than I talk about losses. Okay, I got another question about who's going to be Blazers' late game scorer. Join me in that second segment. We'll talk about go-to in the clutch. That's what we'll do in the second segment. Join me there. First, though, I want to tell you about Monarch Money. Have you ever thought to yourself, like, I just wish it was easier to save money. I wish it was easier to manage my wealth. Well, with Monarch Money, it can be easier. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, all of your investments, and all of your spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building your wealth. You can check out all of your spending. You can track things by specific category like dining out or groceries or subscriptions or what have you. You can also look at all of your accounts in one spot. So if you have a checking account, savings account, you got a mortgage, you got investments in a couple different places, or student loan debt that you also want to have an eye on, right? All of that in one app, open it up, see it right there on your screen. It just makes building your wealth and saving money a whole lot easier, a whole lot simpler, a whole lot more streamlined. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. And the code is LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. All right, let's keep it rolling. Special delivery mailbag. This next question comes from a YouTube commenter who I'm not 100% sure what their name is because they had a display name different from what their channel name was on YouTube, but we'll call them Smart YouTube Commenter. This question comes from Smart YouTube Commenter. Thank you, Smart YouTube Commenter. I'm not even going to go there. Thank you, Smart YouTube Commenter. I appreciate you. The question is, Mike, now that Anthony Simons is gone, when the Trailblazers are down by 1 with 10 seconds left, who's going to be the go-to guy? Yeah, that was Ant last year. His numbers in the clutch, which the NBA defines by 5-point games, games within 5 points in the final 5 minutes, pretty good. Shot 38% from three in those closing minutes. He on some volume, and he was the go-to guy because of skill set, right? Not overall talent, but skill set, and that's some of what they're lacking here. And by the skill set, I mean when it comes down like 10 seconds left in the game, you're trailing. Everybody in the world knows you need to shoot. You kind of need someone who is comfortable taking jump shots off the dribble because in those situations, you can't always get to the rim. And why I emphasize that is because I think Deni Avdija is the Blazers' probably best just downhill dude. Like, hey, go get us a bucket, downhill driver. But Deni doesn't have much in between game. And I know there's been some, and Deni has mentioned this, that sort of the team said like, hey, we want you to take shots at the rim and threes. We don't want you to take mid-range pull-ups. But like, that's specific to Deni. Shaedon Sharpe takes mid-rangers. Anthony Simons take mid-rangers because they're better at it, right? Like, it's not that the team says nobody can take mid-rangers. It's like, we gotta make sure everyone's doing what they're good at, right? Like, you kind of, that is like, people get confused with sort of the analytics movement being like, no one can take a mid-range jumper, wah, wah, wah. And it's not that. It's that like we have a lot of data that suggests that is easier to sort of parse to say, what do guys actually excel at? And teams can try to carve out plans for getting guys to do what they do best. Now, I don't know the Blazers always do that. I don't know that all NBA teams always do that. But certainly if Deni Avdija had more mid-range pull-ups arsenal, they would let him do it, right? So I think Ant was just their best bet last year because of the shot creation and the comfort shooting off the dribble, the comfort shooting from deep off the dribble. Like he was better at it. He doesn't get to all the way to the rim as well, but he has good floater, weird off-foot floater game. And he was useful in that role. Not elite at it by any means, but in terms of the Blazers' best option in those moments, Ant was the guy. He's gone, though. And I think there's two obvious choices for who kind of steps into that role, and they're the Blazers' best like shot creators. For all of Drew Holiday's gifts, not a shot creator, not a dude you can throw the ball to and say, hey, we need you to go get a tough bucket. In a pinch, Drew can take jumpers off the dribble, but like that's not where you're going to maximize his skill set or appreciate his skill set. It's Deni Avdija, and it's Shaedon Sharpe. Shaedon Sharpe, at the end of the season, was an elite finisher and got to the rim pretty darn well. He's comfortable taking mid-range pull-ups. He's not a good three-point shooter, nor has he been, which makes this down one with 10 seconds left. Guys are going to pack the paint. They're going to dare him to shoot from distance and say, hey, we're going to give you a little bit of space. Go ahead and shoot it. If Sharpe takes a step forward as a shooter this year, it is a very big deal, not only for the final seconds, but for the first 47 minutes and 59 seconds that precede it. That's a huge, huge thing for him. I think the choice, though, for the most part right now is between Shaedon Sharpe and Deni Avdija. Deni's got to get some in-between game. They got to unleash his in-between game. They got to, there needs to be some comfort with the coaching staff, allowing him to experiment with a little bit more of it. Deni's got to get more comfortable, like with this kind of a floater or a pull-up jumper. He just doesn't have that move right now. He didn't have it in Washington. He didn't develop it with the Blazers. That is on him, to a skill that he needs to develop and convince the coaches that he can go do. But he's just such a good driver. He was the Blazers' best player last season, and in the sort of simplest terms, at the end of games, you give the ball to your best player and say, go score. And I think it'll be Deni, but I also think this speaks to the Blazers' challenges this season. Last year, on a points per play basis, according to Cleaning the Glass, the Blazers were 24th in half-court offense. What points per play is that it's points per play, so it's when you go down and take a shot, but it excludes offensive rebounds. That would be points per possession. You can get multiple plays in any given possession if you were to get offensive rebounds. They also have a points per possession stat. But in points per play, excluding offensive rebounds, Blazers were a pretty bad half-court offense. And I think they got worse because DeAndre Ayton has some bailout stuff with he's a really good mid-range shooter, and you can get to those spots. And Anthony Simons was the Blazers' best off-the-dribble shot creator, and they didn't replace that skill set yet, and I can't imagine that they do moving forward necessarily. I think one of the things that I would be a little bit worried about here in the Blazers' late-game score is the hierarchy of Jerami Grant. If he's a dude who closes games, Chauncey Billups has shown a willingness to play through Jerami Grant in the clutch. And I don't love that because Jerami Grant doesn't pass. And he forgot how to make twos last year, which I think is actually a much bigger problem. He's a good three-point shooter. He was worse last year than his first couple seasons in Portland, but he is a good three-point shooter. He was still above average three-point shooter, even if he took a step back from where he had been. But he just shot horrendously inside the arc. And it's hard to be a go-to, go-get-a-bucket type of guy if you just can't score inside the arc. And Jerami Grant's just not a natural playmaker. They've run a couple of these sets late games where it's throw it into Jerami and he has a chance to make a read off, a handoff, and then go to work. He always fakes the handoff and goes to work, and everybody knows it because it's Jerami freaking Grant. So I do think there's a little part of me that worries Grant and sort of hierarchy and I don't know, the respect that comes from being the elder statesman and having a track record of being a pretty good scorer at certain times of his career, decent ISO score at certain times of his career that earns him that spot. I would like it to be Shaedon Sharpe and him take that step forward. If he is incapable of that, and he might be, I think Deni Avdija is the obvious choice, although I think his lack of comfort pulling up and taking pull-up jumpers off the dribble makes it a little bit dicey, which speaks to the whole thing. The Blazers were a bad half-court offense last year and are probably a worse half-court offense this year considering their personnel. And I think they're gonna be good on defense. How good, I think, is within question, but I think they're gonna be a good defensive team, a very competitive defensive team, I should say. I think good it suggests some sort of relativity that I'm not really ready to make yet, but they're going to be a very competitive defensive team and have an opportunity to be a really good defensive team. They just have a bunch of good defenders. That's how you make a good defensive team. But if they get in these games where it's tight, score down the stretch type of thing, I think we saw this a little bit with the Rockets last year. It's they could score, and they were a really good offensive rebounding team, but they scored in transition, and they locked people up on defense, and they got there, and they rebounded their own misses. But when it came down to moments where it's who's going to get us a bucket down, 3 with 3 minutes left, down 2 with 2 minutes left, down 1 with a minute left, tied with 30 seconds left. They didn't have that, and obviously even that group is more talented than the Blazers are in terms of offense and shot creation. But I think it's a similar feel, and we saw kind of what that looks like. Okay, to close the show, got a question about Jerami Grant. What's the problem with little Jerami Grant? We'll answer that to close the show. Join me in that third segment. still a pass for his point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond, and you are still listening to Locked On Blazers. We're still rolling through a special delivery mailbag if you want to get involved. And a future mailbag, email me, lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com. This question comes from Professor Pete. Professor Pete asks, Professor Pete, also a longtime listener. Shout out to you, Professor Pete. Professor Pete asks, if we can't get anything decent for him, I don't see what the big deal is in keeping Jerami Grant around for a while. Even though he is overpaid in some sense, the team can afford it right now. Actually, sorry, let me read that sentence correctly. Even though he is overpaid in some sense, we, collective pronoun, shout out to Professor Pete, we can afford it right now. He is a good shooter and a good defender, which is what we, collective pronoun, need and fits into the identity of this team. What's the big deal about having an overpaid guy that's still pretty good? There's something to this, right? As I mentioned, the Blazers were a heinous, pretty awful bottom 7 in the league half-court offense. Like they were a very, 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 very good offensive rebounding team, but they still struggled to score in the half court. When the game was in the half court, they struggled to score, and I think they're probably worse in half court settings, barring significant steps forward from Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe, and Denny Avdia and Tumani, et cetera, et cetera. Like, they're going to need someone to take a maybe not a huge leap, but a meaningful step, a meaningful progress in order to improve there. And I think that's what they're banking on. That's the point of the roster to some extent. So maybe they will get there, right? But like they are light on shooters. They just are. They're light on above average shooters. And the half court offense speaks to that, right? Because it's not just that like they're 20th in like 3-point accuracy in the league, right? It's just like if you can't generate easy points in any way, shooting is a good way to alleviate it because it does add maybe a little more variance to it. But like the whole point of shooting in the NBA is that the threat of threes opens up shots at the rim. That is what this era is all about. That is what the space era and the 3-point era is all about, is leveraging the space on the court, leveraging 3-point shooting to generate looks at the rim. The Blazers got to the rim a bunch. They just don't get to a clean paint often because you just don't have to worry about enough shooters. And if they do have a shooter if they do have like a proven above average shooter in the lineup that's definitely going to play on night one, it's Jerami Grant. I think there's a world in which Scoot Henderson graduates into an above average shooter, although we'd have to see it for a fairly big chunk before I think defense is worried about it. Shaedon Sharpe, I'm a little worried on, quite frankly, this far into his career at the level he has shot the ball at. It doesn't mean that the thing is written, but yeah, like he's had a long enough stretch in the league as a below average shooter to make me a little like, even if the aesthetics of the jumper look beautiful, it is what it is. At some point it has to go in. Tumani is a good shooter. He's a good shooter. Shot it very well last season, but he doesn't shoot enough and he doesn't fly around screens at a level which like opens up the floor yet. But I think there's a world. I think there is a way to have Tumani like really start bombing away enough that it becomes a meaningful shooter. Denny after a really rough stretch, took major strides as a shooter. But he doesn't get treated like a shooter. Klingon can't shoot. Hansen can't shoot probably. I'm guessing. We haven't really seen him. Rob Williams doesn't shoot. He's taken 7 threes in his entire career. I get doo-wop, but like, are you going to play your fourth center to like shoehorn shooting in there? Matisse Thybulle, career below average 3-point shooter, has had stretches where he shot very well, but never for any significant amount of time. It's Jerami, right? It's Jerami. So that gets us to Professor Pete's question. It's like Grant is the only dude in the lineup who is a proven above average shooter in the league. And even last year where he was awful inside the arc, just forgot how to make 2-pointers, shot under 40% inside the arc, which is outrageous for someone of his size. Still even with a step back from shooting threes, still was a 38% 3-point shooter, has had seasons where he shot 40% from 3. Jerami Grant quietly is one of the great developmental stories of the last, 10 years, right? Like he was such a non-shooter athlete defender when he came into the league and has turned himself into like a good shooter during his career. He's someone you can point to who's like, what kind of just like, when's the last time like a raw super defender actually becomes a 3-and-D wing? Jerami Grant. He's made, I don't know, $250 million for his troubles for that development, right? It's worked out well for him. So that gets me to this question. That's classic Mike. I just spent 5 minutes talking about whatever. Let me answer the question. I was trying to set the stage. I wasn't talking about whatever. I try to provide, what's the phrase I used the other day? Texture and nuance to these questions. I'm adding some texture and nuance. Grant does indeed have a skill set that the Blazers lack. He does indeed defend. He did defend pretty well last year, despite some his offensive struggles. I thought he had stretches where he was very good on defense, some stretches where he kind of didn't always bring it. But like, I thought he had stretches last year where he's like, oh yeah, Jerami Grant's good on defense. Wow, he really helps. Wow, if you have Tumani and Denny and Jerami Grant on the court, wow, you can really have some nice stretches where it's hard to score, hard to drive, hard to get easy buckets. Right? That's length and size and switchability and that versatility on the wings. Like there was moments when he was really useful. Shooting, defense, some size, doesn't rebound, doesn't pass. But like defense and shooting, they need those skills, right? So the problem with him in any individual game this season is very little. He's useful. The issue is like the rush to trade Jerami Grant. If like what the big deal is keeping him around is the future, right? It is the flexibility that paying someone that he's going to be paid over $100 million, $106 million over the next 3 seasons, I believe. It is paying for someone, starter money who is producing like a bench level player. Like if he has the season he just had, again, as he ages, like that's a problem because you are just in a salary cap league that is increasingly punitive for if you go, if you are a particularly expensive roster, paying someone twice as much money as their production suggests limits your ceiling. It's not going to limit their ceiling in this particular season, I would imagine, but it is going forward your options because he's hard to trade, hard to move. If you do trade him, hard to upgrade when you make those trades. So the problem with like the rush to trade Jerami Grant is not because they just have to rid themselves of him. I think that's actually a misread. The rush to trade him was one, he seems like kind of in the way, but I think they've because they got rid of DeAndre Ayton and Anfernee Simons and returned one total player, they've kind of cleared some of the like who's going to play logjam stuff. I still don't know if waiving DeAndre Ayton is deft roster maneuvering. I think it's just like they just cut bait. I don't think he's necessarily in the way, depending on how they utilize him. There's a chance he gets utilized in a way that makes him feel like he's in the way. But like, on any given night, Jerami Grant helps. The problem is into the future when you do sign Tumani Camara to a contract extension, when you do, assuming they do sign Shaedon Sharpe to a contract extension, when you have to pay Scoot, and Denny, and et cetera, it's still having that money on the books for Jerami Grant and maybe for Jrue Holiday. We shall see. Maybe we'll have this question about Jrue Holiday next season, or in a few months. Like it is the lack of flexibility to upgrade the roster. And I think in the past iterations of the Blazers, that's kind of been the problem. It's like, yeah, they have some functional players, but the roster was, the role players were a little too expensive and not highly coveted enough on the trade market in order to find clean, easy upgrades. And that's the challenge with Jerami Grant. It's not necessarily that you have to trade him at this point. It's that if his production doesn't match his salary, and there's no way to rid the team of him while upgrading the team, you're just kind of moving forward with him and your opportunities to upgrade the roster, which you just at some point, like it becomes, you realize, okay, we're at this level, and to get to this level, this is like, you have to take a step. And I think the Blazers will analyze some of this year as like what level they think they're at, and particularly in regard to how the young guys play. And if you don't have the flexibility to trade the sort of ancillary pieces, the other parts on the roster, say, okay, these 4 dudes are definitely part of the future. How can we get better? If you have players in the roster that don't allow you to upgrade, it really hinders you. I don't think there's necessarily a rush to trade Jerami Grant. The challenge is if he is too expensive, he doesn't hinder the 2025 Trailblazers, but 26 and 27 and beyond Trailblazers, those years when you're still paying him more money and you have fewer and fewer outs and more urgency to be competitive, that is the problem. Professor Pete, I hope that answered your question about what's the big deal about having an overpaid guy on the roster. That's going to do it for today's show. Tomorrow's show, we're going to talk Summer League, what I'm going to be watching and how I'm going to be watching it. We'll talk Yang Hansen and others, but it'll be a Hansen focused show because that's who I want to watch at Summer League. And I'll talk about kind of what has generally been my methodology and approach for watching basketball in Vegas, which is mostly pretty ugly. That will do it for this one. Come back for tomorrow. It's what we do 5 days a week, wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. I appreciate you listening. I will talk to you soon.